Hello and welcome everyone. In this video I will show how I've made the T-Rex diorama. I will be covering all steps to make this redwood forest, with the trees being in a separate video. The build starts with a board of multiplex. On top of this I will be placing some high density foam, which I already cut into shape. I attach the foam onto the board using PVA glue. For added strength, I made my personal signature in PVA glue. I made some areas of depth into the foam using a small hobby blowtorch. To make a transition between the layers, I've added some modeling clay. Just as a quick word and update on the channel, as you may have noticed, I haven't been able to post a video in a while since my last one, but for the coming time I'm looking for a possibility for me to run this channel full time, so I can create and upload videos for you guys more often and on a regular basis. And if you want to help support this channel, you can now do so through Patreon. That would be very helpful of course, but regardless I'll do my best to make videos as often as I can. Having said that, let's quickly continue with the build. To fill in the gaps on the sides, I gave it a layer of wood filler and sanded it afterwards. The base was then given a layer of gesso primer. I gave the underside a layer of wood stain and then added some felt pads for some stability. When this was done, I applied a layer of PVA glue and covered the board with tile grout. As the next step, I will make a mixture out of modeling paste, sand and some acrylic paint. I've made some boulders for the base using these rock molds and some casting plaster. Using the paste mixture, I then add them onto the base. With the larger rocks now in place, I will add some smaller stones around them. With this, I wanted to create a small creek which runs through the forest. With all the stones in place, I dust it with some tile grout, followed by a layer of scenery glue. To simulate some fallen trees, I've added some natural branches. The base was then given a layer of sand-colored primer. The branches were then painted, dry brushed and given a wash afterwards. To make some moss on the branches, I'll be using this mixture of dried herbs. I randomly add some PVA glue and then sprinkle the herb mixture over it. As the next step, I gave the board a base coat of raw umber and black. I follow this up by painting the small stones with a few brownish grey tones. With all the stones painted, I can then begin adding some trees onto the board. The first ones I'll be using are these redwood trees. I'll show you how to make them in my next video, but at the very end of this video I've added a little preview of how I made them. Using the same acrylic paste mixture I used earlier, I attached them onto the base. With the trees in place, I will then begin making the ground cover. I'll be using this wood fiber, which you can find at a pet store or supermarket. To give this a finer texture, I'm giving it a few seconds in this coffee grinder. When this was done, I'm giving it some color by adding some acrylic paint and water. This is then mixed and placed on some baking paper to dry. I'm then combining this material with modeling paste, paint and some water. This is then added onto the base as a first layer. I try giving it some volume by using some advanced modeling tools. To accompany the redwoods, I'll be adding these trees I've made as well. I have tutorials to make these on my channel, for which I'll place a link in the description. The dead trees were added first, followed by the pines at a later stage. To make some plants for the base, I'll be using this plastic fern, which I gave a quick rinse in some soapy water. I clip them from the stem and also remove any bits of plastic flash from the leaves. To give them a more natural curve, I hold them in some hot water for a few seconds and then place them in cold water to hold their shape. I will then glue them to some florist wire, followed with some plastic putty to mask the transition between the wire and the leaves. With all the leaves on their new stems, I then began painting them. I first gave them a layer of solvent-based primer and base coat, and then added some shadows and highlights to the leaves using acrylic paints. The ferns were then added to the base in random groups. The advantage of having them on this florist wire is you can elevate them a little bit so they group together a bit nicer, as well as being firmly attached to the base. With the ferns now created, I then added the pine trees. As the next step, I'll make the second layer of ground cover by combining these materials I've selected. I start with the branches and the moss first and add the finer materials later. A diluted mixture of acrylic paste is then added, which is basically going to be our dressing. This is then combined with some water and a splash of acrylic ink. This mixture is then added onto the base. I start with the coarser materials first and gradually build this up by adding the rest. With this, you will want to create some volume by mixing it together. This is then followed by a generous layer of scenery glue to set it all in place. I'll then be adding some of these twigs I already painted, as well as some of this dried moss. I'll use this to simulate some dry leaves amongst the ferns. With these in place, I will also be adding 2 types of natural plant leaves. I preserve these myself using glycerin. With all the vegetables now added, I then painted the sides of the base. To make some water for the small creek we made earlier, I'll be mixing some epoxy resin with a drop of acrylic paint. This is then added to the base, as well as a few scattered model leaves. With the base all finished, it's now time to add the inhabitants of this forest. I've repainted both of them, for which I'll make a video very soon. That brings us to the end of this video. I really hope you've enjoyed watching it and to see you in the next one. Until then, thank you for watching and take care.